How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer here, Wrestling Observer Radio. It is January 1, 2017. Figure4online.com/WrestlingObserver.com. Happy New Year, Dave. Another year.
Yep.
It's come and gone.
Yep. What did you do last night?
Nothing. Got a baby.
Oh, okay.
She went to bed, and then I stayed home, and then the fireworks woke her up, and she cried, and then eventually went back to sleep, and then I went to sleep.
Oh.
It's very, very exciting.
I went to a unique party.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. One of the parents of one of my son's friends. So it was like everything. It was every caricature of a party from like 20 years ago. I mean, like just. It was, I guess I'll explain some of them because it was pretty weird. It's like, I thought like I was like way past the situation where I'm watching guys hit. So there's this guy, okay, who he looked like Jim Rome, and he's talking to me, and it was one of those things where all of a sudden it was like, so there was one. There was one guy who knew someone who sued Ric Flair from the plane flight to hell, who was amazed because the term plane flight from hell, I actually made up that term. So he's explained to me, he was just taking it good-naturedly, and he's telling me the story. Another guy there dated Deborah Marshall after Steve Austin and Deborah broke up. Deborah McMichael, she's probably better known as. So that was quite wild. And then another guy is like bragging. I mean, I'm sitting here going like, I've seen this stuff when I was younger, but these also are people in their early 40s. It's not like they're 25 years old, right? And this guy is like bragging about the size of his dick to these two women that he's trying to hit on. And I'm like just sitting there going, I can't believe at this stage of my life, I'm watching this. I mean, it was just like, it was just like...
Sounds like a hell of a party.
No, it was pretty fun. I mean, it was interesting because, it was like nobody there watched pro wrestling, but we had this pro wrestling thing because two of the different guys there had a connection to it, and all of the guys knew who Ric Flair was. So it was like the Ric Flair story started, and several people had watched the fight the night before, and a lot of them didn't. And I even got the speech from some woman about how can you write about that stuff? They're in a cage. They're trying to beat each other up. Keep in mind, they're doing brain damage to each other. Keep in mind that this person had season tickets to both the Sharks and the 49ers. And I'm explaining, like, you do realize that hockey players and football players are, their brains are getting messed up by their sport as well. And it's like, it's not the same thing. And I go, it actually kind of is the same thing. All contact sports are dangerous as hell, So it's like, it was kind of an interesting evening.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
Well, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Is there anyone that's listening to this show right now that was at the party going, God, this Dave Meltzer. Can't believe he's talking about this on the air.
Probably not, but
it was too bad.
It was pretty funny. I was just like, wow, this is crazy. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk some news. We already know the location for the 2018 WrestleMania. They will be heading back to New Orleans.
After 4 years, I was really surprised they were going back so quick. I first heard about it like this morning. And so they're going to have a press conference. I think it's going to be Tuesday. It might be Monday, but it'll be Monday or Tuesday of this, not this week, but next week. Because Raw's in New Orleans on Monday, and Undertaker and Shawn Michaels will be on Raw that week to go through their, I guess they'll probably shoot their angles for whatever both of those guys are doing for the Royal Rumble.
I know this is a stupid question, but why is The Undertaker coming back to Raw? I thought it was made abundantly clear that he was a SmackDown guy.
Yeah, he was, huh?
Yeah, he was. In fact, he came back and he said that he was back. Then we never saw him again, and now he's going to Raw.
Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer to that question.
Huh.
He's such a big star he can be on either show, I guess.
How about that?
Yeah. Well, look, when it's important for like the January 9th show is going head to head with the football championship, college football championship, which usually does 25 million viewers. So you need something big, and this thing about carefully defined Raw and SmackDown and no one can be on both shows stuff, that goes out the window when you're going head to head with a game like that, and you need something big. And I don't believe Goldberg or Lesnar are on that show. Goldberg's going to be on Raw, obviously, tomorrow night. And Lesnar's going to be back on, I'm thinking that he's on the 16th, but that I could be wrong about that. I don't have a definite on Lesnar's next show. But I would expect that I think Lesnar's on the 16th, which is the bounce back show where the rating should be up because there's no more football. And the 23rd show, I believe that, actually the 23rd show, I know that Goldberg and Lesnar are both on the 23rd show. So that's kind of like, I guess, some of the special attraction stuff, for Raw. So I think that like the number tomorrow, it's going against a college football game. I mean, it's a big game too, but I don't think it's as big as an NFL game. So I think the number should probably be around the 3 million mark, in that range. It should be up though this week. Then the 16th, I think with Shawn and Undertaker, they'll maintain the number even against the big football game, but they could get killed. If they had nothing, they would get killed. And then the 23rd or the 16th, I think that that's when, in theory, if they're doing like what they've been doing like 2.9 million, I think lately, or roughly. So in theory, they should bounce back by the 16th about 10% to which would be about 3.2 million. And that's kind of where it should stand, between that. Maybe it'll go up a little more as Mania comes. But that's kind of where, which is still down from last year, but that's, I think, kind of where, in theory, things could come back. They may not bounce back 10%. Like last year, they were supposed to bounce back and they didn't, and I would think they will this year, but there's no guarantees.
So tomorrow, being Tuesday, at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern, it is the New Japan Tokyo Dome show, which you can check out on New Japan World.
Well, there's a lot of so New Japan World's going to have a ton of stuff live, starting at about 1, I think, about 1 a.m. on Eastern Time on Monday night. They're going to have like the fan access. I think that they're going to have like the building, like they show, like at least last year I remember that I had it on in the background and they were showing them like, they were constructing the ring and the stage and everything, and they had all that like on the air. It was kind of like just the camera on the Tokyo Dome for hours and hours before the show started, so you can kind of like just tune in and watch them, do everything. So I guess they're not going to let the wrestlers practice in the ring in secret.
I was going to say, what about all those guys going in there doing their moves before the show?
Yeah, I guess they're not doing that.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
What's funny is back in the day, that was so heavily frowned upon. And
Doing
now,
moves?
everybody does it. I shouldn't say everybody.
You know what? It's like because of the way travel was and everything like that. There was a period where that wasn't done at all. But I mean, I remember being in places in the 80s where I saw it done. You know what I mean? It's like they said no one did it, but they did it. It really wasn't. Not so much in the United States, but in Mexico, Mexico, some of the stuff.
Well, Mexico's different because there's so much high flying and choreography and.
Yeah, but I saw it in Japan too.
Yeah.
And Japan was strong style, and I saw guys going in the ring, and practicing their stuff, in the 80s at times. Smaller promotions, not all Japan, or New Japan. Well, that's because they wouldn't let you, because they were very protective. They were very, very protective of the business in those days. But it wasn't. It's like but still not to the degree of now. No.
So that's the deal, and then the New Japan Rumble will kick off the show. And is that the official opening match, or is that like a pre-show match before the 2:30 start time.
No, it would be right around 2:30, and then like at 3, would the official opener would be the Tiger Mask W and whatever Dark Tiger or whatever the name is of his heel opponent. It's just Ibushi and ACH. So that'll be that's the official opening match, and the other match is like the pre-show comedy match. And the Rumble is just like, it's, all the guys on the promotion, like Nagata and Nakanishi, Tenzan, those guys that, trying to think who else, Taguchi, Hawato, all those guys, Tiger Master, Jushin Liger, all those guys are going to be in there, and then they'll have like a lot of nostalgia figures. I don't know who they'll necessarily be, but Scott Norton's name's been mentioned. Fujiwara is usually in every year. Kabuki's usually in. I wouldn't be surprised to see Haku in. He was in last year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in this year because his son is a young boy in the dojo, big young boy. You seen his son? He's like 6'8", and he makes Bad Luck Fale look tiny, and he's got these giant shoulders. I mean, he's got, like, from a look standpoint, he's like he's got the look, and from what I understand, he's as far as like the training that he's gotten so far, they feel he's got a lot of promise, and he's going to learn his wrestling in Japan. And the track record of guys who learn their wrestling in Japan, it's not 100%. Obviously nowhere is, but it's pretty damn good. The guys that come from the New Japan Dojo, I mean, there are obviously misses, but most of them turn out to be pretty good.
So the big question is, and I know you've got a lot of emails about this, Kyle O'Reilly, who is working on the show, and his Ring of Honor contract is expiring.
It's expired. It expired in like an hour ago, or yesterday.
Man, oh man.
It expired yesterday. So if he's going to sign a new contract or not, I think that the result of the match will tell you the answer. If he retains the championship, then obviously he's staying. If he loses the championship back to Adam Cole, I think that's a sign that he's leaving. But we'll see.
The World of Sport New Year's Eve show ended up doing a good number, not a great number, not a terrible number. And I guess now the question still remains if they're going to do a series.
Yeah, the number isn't strong enough to guarantee. It was 1.25 million viewers, which is, I don't know the last time there was a pro wrestling television show in the UK that did that type of a number. I mean, for sure there's been nothing in like the last 17, 18 years. When WCW and WWE had shows on regular television as opposed to Sky, they never hit that number. They got around 1 million. So it's the biggest in a long, long time. But, it should be. It's on ITV, which is much bigger than Channel 4 or Channel 5. But the number wasn't big enough. Like if they had done 1.5 million, I think it would have been or 1.75 million, it would have been a lock. If you looked at the number, the quarters, I wouldn't call it good. It's not a disaster. Under 1 million would have been pretty bad. So it was a number. So we'll have to see if it's going to be greenlit. I think everybody was kind of looking that this number would come out and you'd have the answer. And the number came out and you don't have the answer because it could go either way with that number. I think that some people were talking about, when the DVR number comes in, that if it was heavily DVR'd, that would help. One thing, there's a couple of components to that number. Because in a sense, the number is disappointing, but there was a football game, soccer. We'll call it soccer on this show. There was a soccer match with Liverpool and Manchester City that did ridiculous numbers, like triple what a usual big soccer game does. Not triple what a soccer game does, but triple what a big soccer game does. And that went head to head. And that pretty much almost all the programming, also on BBC and ITV, almost all the programming was down from New Year's Eve. So it was just, maybe they were watching soccer, I don't know. But whatever it was. So, yeah, so that may be an extenuating thing or whatever. So, Yeah, I haven't seen the show yet. I was going to try to get to it after the show tonight. So I've heard more positive than negative, but I've absolutely heard a lot of negative on it. So I don't know. It just depends on. I think a lot depends on what you were looking for. A lot of people didn't like that it wasn't the style of wrestling that has been the style that has brought wrestling back on the indie level in the UK. That it was, it was television executives' idea of what they think pro wrestling to appeal to, kids and families would be. So that was the idea, with a lot of nostalgia thrown in. World of Sport nostalgia, because it was, the ITV had it. I mean, generally speaking, when you're bringing back an idea, a show that was successful 30 years ago, and you bring it back for nostalgia purposes, it usually doesn't hold up very. It's not a surprise to get a good first number, but it usually doesn't hold up. So they need an appeal. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fact they did all those nostalgia things on the show. Actually, I think that's really cool that they did. But ultimately, people who on Saturday afternoons used to watch wrestling in the old days, 30 years ago, they've moved on, and their favorite wrestlers are gone, and all that. That's not that appeal is only going to last a week. They need a lot more than that, obviously, and everyone knows that. So, again, a lot of people, when your top star is Grado, that's whatever. It was Grado is the guy who they built around.
Now, you did watch the World Series of Fighting. We talked briefly about it on Friday night. And
no, we didn't. We're talking about Ryzen, not World Series.
I think we talked a little bit about World Series.
World Series was yesterday, so
maybe we previewed the World Series of Fighting. I don't know. Anyway, the point is you watched it.
Yeah, so World Series was New Year's Eve, and so John Fitch. The show was really was pretty. It was on NBC, so now I was out of prime time, so I don't think the viewership would be that big, but it's still NBC. I would, it would be like, I would think for sure it's like the biggest audience that World Series has ever had, and it was actually the same time slot pretty much as ITV. I mean, the ITV show was 5 to 7 in the UK. This was 4 to 6 in Eastern time. John Fitch beat Jake Shields, and Fitch said, it was kind of hinting retirement when it was over, saying he's got a bulging disc, and he had a very unsettling MRI test that he needs to follow up on his brain, which never sounds good. Guys are a lot more. Everyone is a lot more cautious about that than in the past. So guys, when they see stuff like that, a lot of guys are getting out. Whereas years ago, people would go a lot longer. Main event was a hell of a fight for 3 rounds with Justin Gaethje and Luis Firmino, and it was stopped after 3 when Firmino's right eye, I should say, was swollen shut, and the doctor stopped it, which the doctor had to do. He couldn't see out of the eye. So it was a pretty good show.
And Rising.
Well, I shouldn't. Let me say, the main event was pretty good. The first match was okay. The Fitch and Shields match reminded you exactly why John Fitch and Jake Shields got cut from UFC when they were both top 10 fighters, because it was 5 rounds, and it was grinding 5-round, not very exciting fight. There weren't much in the way of boos. There were some light boos here and there. I've seen, but it was quiet, and it was not. It wasn't like a good spectator fight at all.
And you saw the whole Ryzen show.
I saw most of the Ryzen show. I didn't see everything, but I did see, Crow Cop win the tournament, and Crow Cop beat Baruto, and everything like that. Yeah, it's...
God, Crow Cop, another openweight title in 2016.
Well, I guess that tells you a little bit about the competition and lack thereof. The only guy in that tournament that and he probably should have beaten Crow Cop is Mo, but again, Mo's a lot smaller. He's not a real heavyweight. Crow Cop is, and Crow Cop's still a much better striker than Mo, even at the age he's at right now. And Baruto was essentially a rookie. He's only had 3 fights, and he's a sumo guy. He's not really much of a trained fighter. The only thing he had going for him is being really big. And then the Amir, the wrestler, he's pretty new at this as well. So he you would think that he would have had a shot, but he really didn't. So Crow Cop handled him pretty quickly. Once Crow Cop was so much better of a stand-up fighter.
So, any other final notes from Raw for tomorrow besides Goldberg showing up before we go to these questions here?
No. I heard there's a couple matches on SmackDown. There's Raw's got Sami Zayn and Braun Strowman for the in a what's it called Last Man Standing match, and then there's Miz and Ziggler, and I believe there's one other match on SmackDown that's been announced. Let me see if I can find it. For those of you in New York, as I figured, they are doing an extension under the terms of the old agreement while they try to work out an agreement. So you will be able to watch Raw on Spectrum Cable this week anyway. They haven't come to an agreement, but they have done that. So the other one is it's Miz and Ambrose. I'm sorry, Miz and Ambrose for the Intercontinental, and Ziggler and Corbin in a singles match are the 2 bouts that are scheduled for SmackDown.
Any WrestleMania updates?
There's only 2 matches, or 3 matches that are official, and everything else is changing or is not official.
Changing.
Well, things are just different. Nothing's official, but it's the Bill Goldberg and Brock is official. Big Show and Shaq is official. Well, it's not official because it hasn't been announced, but those are locks, and Triple H and Rollins. So any other match
that means no Shield reunion.
No, the Shield's not going to do a 6-man tag. They never were. There's always going to be Triple H and Rollins. And Roman Reigns was always going to have a singles match. And Ambrose, I don't know where Ambrose fits on the card. So, and who Reigns wrestles is I mean, if you watch the TV, you would be led to believe it's Strowman, and it's not that it's like not Strowman, but it's not official. There's many different ideas being pitched. So anything can happen. And, over the next couple of weeks, I think it's going to become pretty obvious how everything, what happens. But but things may be changing in the next couple of weeks.
Let's do some of the questions here. Mailbag at WrestlingObserver.com. You can send your questions anytime if you're a subscriber, and we'll get into them here on the show. Ross says, do any current WWE wrestlers have Lloyd's of London insurance policies?
Well, number one, Lloyd's of London stopped insuring wrestlers a long time ago after the number
they all
of
retired and came back?
A lot of people, too many guys collected from that first batch, so then they just stopped. They just got out of it. And I mean, like I think they're still suing Brett. I never heard it was settled, and I talked to Brett the last time he was in the Bay Area. So it was a couple months back, and he told me that it was still going on. Can you believe it? After all these, it's like what, he retired 16 years ago. Well, I mean the suit. Well,
it was over the return.
It was over the return in 2010. Yeah, that's what it was. So they don't insure wrestlers anymore.
So I've been watching the old Raw and Nitros from 19 years ago. So I'm at the end of 97, and they did the horrendous and famous edition of NWO Nitro right before Starrcade 97.
Oh, God, that show was horrendous.
Yeah, it was absolutely horrible. But they have Rick Rude on commentary, and at the time you did not like Rick Rude on commentary, but when you look at the announced teams today, and then you go back to 97, Rick Rude was awesome on commentary.
Wow.
And he's sitting there the whole time, and he's cutting promos on Sting. He's furious that Sting ended his career, and
Sting did end his career.
Rude had a broken back, right? Because he kept saying he broke his neck. I thought he got his back caught on the stage.
He broke his back and he broke his neck. He had two different injuries.
It's both of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's ranting and raving about his broken neck and his broken back, and it's a hell of a promo, actually. And obviously, at the time that he passed away, which was 99, he was training to come back. So, what do we know about... I mean, did his injuries just totally heal? Was he never that badly hurt, but he just wanted to collect his policy? What was the story with him?
He was pretty badly hurt, but, he got to a certain point where he was around it all the time, and he just wanted to come back. So, guys come back from injuries. I mean... that they often shouldn't come back. I mean, DiBiase considered it, but never did. Hennig came back. Brett, Brett couldn't come back, but, if he could, he would have. Guys, Animal came back. So, yeah, these, the injuries were legit injuries. It's not like guys faked injuries.
Yeah.
But there were people who were...
But it's pro wrestling, so like a career-ending pro wrestling injury. It's different than from like a career-ending football injury. I mean, you can have an injury that is going to prevent you from being athletic at a high level, but you don't need that for pro wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, there's the injuries were legit, but a lot of guys were very happy to collect and sit out a couple of years and make big money and not wrestle, and then a couple of years later, they kind of wanted to come back. So in a lot of cases they did, like Animal did. With Animal, I mean, they had a deal with Animal where, because of his insurance policy, like when he was in WWE, he couldn't be booked in singles matches. He had to work tags because somehow in his return deal, it was that like he's too badly injured to do singles matches, which WWE bookers they weren't happy with that kind of restriction because nobody else had that kind of restriction. It was kind of like, God, we have to work around this guy. He can't do a singles match. It's always got to be a tag. So, it's just weird. Just different.
This person here says, back in 1991 when Jake Roberts turned heel, was he helping to book? Storyline started to get a little darker than usual, and then after he left, they went back to a lighter tone.
He could have had suggestions. He wasn't officially a booker or anything like that. But, I'm sure they would listen to his input. He had a rep for being pretty smart when it came to wrestling, so, you would want to listen to him, I suppose. I mean, he knew his character. He was really smart when it came to his own character, I thought.
This person here says, how long does it take Dave to complete writing an issue of The Observer? Does he start on the new issue as soon as he completes the previous weeks?
Yes.
He usually starts on Tuesday and finishes on Wednesday.
Yeah, right.
It's a rough 24 hours.
Yeah, no, I start as soon as the one issue's done, then I start on the next one.
This person says, does Vince get a percentage from the movies if Dwayne Johnson is billed as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson?
It couldn't be that much because if it was, it would show up on the, on the finances. It's never been shown on the finances. So I'm tempted to say either he doesn't at all or it's a negligible, for sure it's a negligible percentage. So I think the answer would be no. But it was a weird thing, because one of the reasons he wanted to stop using the Rock name was for, because Vince had, I think like him and Vince had a co-ownership of the Rock name. I think that's how the deal was set up. But, he also wanted to transition out of it at one point because of the idea that, he wanted to move past wrestling. And then a couple years later, he just he changed his tune on that and wanted to embrace wrestling and be a bigger guy and everything like that. To be an action hero instead of a comedy guy.
Well, hey, Worked out well for him.
Yeah, it did.
Jonathan here says, on Eric Bischoff's recent podcast, he stated he was confused by WWE's interest in Rousey, and she is no longer a draw after getting beaten. Was he always this short-sighted when it came to understanding the value of megastars? Didn't he also want Mike Tyson when Mike Tyson was coming off 2 losses?
Well, they talked to him, but they thought that the price tag was too high. So they balked at it, and WWE got it, and WWE, the price tag.
The point is they would have brought him in if they could have come to an agreement.
Yeah, but for nowhere near the money that they got. But, it's like he was coming off 2 straight losses, and he did have 3 big losses at that point. But he never got beat the way Ronda got beat on Friday. I mean, that's a different kind of getting beat. Nevertheless, the idea that Ronda Rousey would come to WWE and not be a draw and not garner. Ronda Rousey garners headlines and gets attention no matter what. And if she fought again, she would still get an incredible amount of, I don't know that the pay-per-view number would be through the roof or anything, but there would be a tremendous amount of curiosity, viewership. If she fought on television, if they put her on a Fox show right now against anyone, no matter who, Ronda Rousey on a Fox show, it would break every record. But on a pay-per-view, I don't know that, I don't know the right opponent. I guess if she fought Holly Holm, even now, I think it would do giant numbers. It would do giant numbers, yeah. But I don't expect her to fight again. But if she did, it's not like, Tyson drew for years after his peak. But this definitely hurt, and losses do hurt in MMA and to an extent significantly, but the interest in her was ridiculous over the weekend. I don't know how the pay-per-view did, and there's reasons it may not have done, as good as it could have. But put it this way, if this pay-per-view had been on a Saturday night and she had promoted the hell out of it, it would have done giant numbers. Some of the best numbers they've ever done. I don't know if it would have done the best numbers they've ever done, but it would have been in the ballpark of the best numbers they'd ever done. If and all that boggles my mind. Her doesn't boggle my mind. Her is just what she is. She was bitter at the media and because some people in the media were really reveling in her failure in the Holly Holm fight. But most were just reporters. But she took, she was, not going to do anything. You notice, she didn't talk to Joe Rogan. After the match, I kind of figured she wouldn't. But at the weigh-ins, she walked off at the weigh-ins, too. She wouldn't even talk to Joe Rogan at the weigh-ins.
Jim here says, what was the deal with Sergeant Slaughter wrestling for Jim Crockett in 1985? He did interviews on Crockett TV for a card called Silver Star 85, a 50th anniversary card. Slaughter was in the main event, tagging with Don Kernodle and Magnum TA against the Russians. They even mentioned the stipulation from years earlier, where Kernodle and Slaughter lost a match, and they couldn't team again.
Yeah, with Steamboat and Youngblood. They were supposed to never team again, and they never did, except for that one time. And they were those Slaughter and Kernodle were really good friends, too. It was just, Sarge was working for the AWA at the time. But, guys would go back and forth, and Sarge was a big star in the Carolinas, real big star before, between WWE runs. Slaughter and Kernodle and Steamboat and Youngblood was one of the great feuds in wrestling history, I believe, certainly in Carolina's wrestling history. So, he was a star there, and they brought him in for a show, and I think, because they had Dusty, and Dusty was the booker, that Dusty didn't bring him back. I think maybe there's the feeling, that Dusty kind of filled that spot, and Sarge, Sarge was coming off WWF television, and I don't know. I think Dusty had more charisma than Sarge as a babyface, but Sarge was really hot coming off WWF television. I think for whatever reason they only booked him for the one show, and they never used him again. And he could have drawn. He did work when they worked in the New York market. But those were combined AWA shows, and they used Sarge on those shows. They used Sarge as the top guy. They built the whole shows around Sarge's match, which, he was the most over guy at the time. I kind of questioned doing it because it was kind of like you're saying that this WWF guy is a bigger star than your guys on your own show. But in that market, he was a bigger star than Dusty in that market. And he always got the biggest pops. But he was, after that WWF run where he turned babyface, I don't know what it was. It just didn't sustain at all. Like, he would, the crowds dropped every time. It was like, I don't know what it was. It's like, I think partially he didn't really have good matches. And I think that was a big part of it too, is just that it's okay. Sergeant Slaughter, the American hero, was there. But when he didn't have good matches and he wasn't really in big feuds, he's feuding with Boris Zukov, which, it's against a Russian, but it's Boris Zukov, you know what I mean? Kind of a waste, he's, just because you're Russian and going against Sergeant Slaughter doesn't mean it's going to work.
Kerry here says the WME Badman-esque trailer that was created to hype UFC 207 had a very concrete Hollywood ending in mind from the very beginning. One where Ronda wins back her title and silences her critics and the media. Instead, the world of reality dealt her a heavy hand of getting publicly dismantled by a much higher caliber fighter. Years ago, Dana was concerned about bringing women's MMA into the UFC because he thought no one wanted to pay money to see women get beat up.
The TV ratings have shown, women's fights seem to do better in TV ratings than guys' fights as a general rule.
Well, the question here is, with the brutal way that Ronda lost on Friday, do you think this turned more people off to women's MMA than brought new fans in?
Well, Ronda losing...
That's what did it.
The fact that Ronda lost and probably will not be fighting again is going to turn the Ronda fans off, because they were a very unique group. So, yeah, it was a negative in that way.
I think her loss to Holly Holm turned off tons of fans, and it wasn't because she was brutally knocked out. It was because she lost.
Yeah, but from all indications, everybody was talking about the fight this week. So, it was like if she
but you think this did 1 million buys? You think this did 1.2 million buys?
If it had been on a Saturday night, without a doubt it would have. Every indication was that this was on a Saturday night, and she promoted it. You got to remember, she didn't promote it at all. Yeah, it would have beaten the Holly Holm fight for sure. On a Friday night with no promotion, I doubt it. Again, from the bar pop, reports we got and everything, they were bigger than Conor in most cities. So it's not like, not every city, obviously not Boston, but most cities were bigger than Conor numbers. So the interest level was again, for non-UFC fans, the interest level was bigger than Conor fights. There was, just the
well, then it should do 1.2 million.
Well, it won't on a Friday with no hype for the fight. You got to remember, neither fighter hyped the fight.
So the interest wasn't there.
No, the interest is clearly there, but the interest there to the point where people would, to get people to spend $60 and to get people to be interested. Those are two different things. If it was on television, you don't even have to do that. Then it would have been big. But to get people to spend $60...
Yeah, so I think her loss turned people off to buying this show.
No, the lack of promotion and being on a Friday night, if there was anything, did it. The loss, I think that she would have been... Again, if she would have fought Holly Holm, it would have been way, way bigger, even though she lost.
I feel that this is kind of like the thing you've talked about many times where...
Conor did...
If there was that much interest, they would have watched it on Friday, with or without her doing a ton of promotion.
No. You can't not promote. That's no matter what attraction you have, if you don't promote the attraction. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure it did well, but you can't not promote and do a record. But if she fought Holly Holm, they'd have done 1.5 million buys coming off those. She'd have done. The loss would have led to the next fight doing bigger under normal circumstances. Just the circumstances were not normal. There was everything going against it. But look. There was, just for Ronda alone, there were 10 million Google searches, which, again, the only time that's ever happened was I think, Ronda with Holly Holm and when Anderson Silva broke his leg. So that's, I don't even think Conor even does numbers like that. Conor may have, but I don't remember. I think he's usually around 5 million. So, casual people, curious and all that, mainstream people, it was bigger than a Conor fight for sure, mainstream wise. Business wise, probably not. I mean, it sold more tickets in theory. I don't know how many of those tickets were really sold and not sold. I mean, I'll wait to get the breakdown from the commission in a couple of weeks. But I mean, there were more people in the building. I mean, they legitimately sold out T-Mobile at lower prices. And they never, Conor and Diaz didn't even sell out for the second fight, or the first fight didn't sell out T-Mobile. And UFC 200 didn't sell out T-Mobile either. And that was a big time show. So yeah, there was a ton of interest. Her losing, no, but her not being around, yes, that hurts. As far as people watching her get beat and being turned off because they saw her take a beating and never watch again, no, I don't buy that at all. Not for a second. That's I mean, the Ronda Rousey fans, yes, but as far as you watch this year, and when there's no great women's fight that's going to do giant numbers this year because there's no fight. But if there was, put it this way, if Ronda had won this last fight and then come back to fight Holly Holm, it would have probably been the biggest show that they've ever done, and certainly the biggest Ronda show ever, easily. So her losing, it's not her losing, it's not her taking a beating. It's the same as it always is. I mean, if the right, if you put, I don't know, Paige Van Zandt against somebody on television and it's the right fight, it's still going to draw a mainstream television audience. I mean, that's not going to turn people off. But the star power, the lack of Ronda star power, they don't have no one to duplicate her star power, no matter what they put on. Amanda Nunes against Cyborg, that's still not going to do Ronda numbers. No way. That might have a little bit of intrigue, although I don't know that they'll ever fight either, because, you got to, it's possible. I mean, Amanda is big if she's smart and her team is smart. But then again, they may go in there with the idea that, number one, she can beat her, or they may go in with the idea that, it's her biggest money fight and she should do it. But, going in there and when you're the champ fighting somebody that much bigger than you, I don't think that that's ever smart policy.
This person says, can Dave discuss the Hall of Fame case for Fishman? He's someone who's on the ballot, but his name rarely gets discussed one way or the other.
Well, he was a really big star in the 70s and 80s. I mean, if you look back at the heyday of, just the biggest drawing cards in wrestling in, like, from 80 to 85, which was a really hot period of wrestling all over the world. I mean, Fishman his numbers are pretty high. I mean, he was in a lot of big main events that drew really, really well. He was he was one of Perro Aguayo's big opponents, and Perro Aguayo was just about the biggest drawing card there that there was, and he was in there in those UWA Toreo shows, which, every week, I mean, there was a point where the Toreo was running Friday and Sunday, and they would do 10,000 people both Friday and Sunday on average over the course of a year. I mean, there were years where Toreo sold 1 million tickets for pro wrestling in a year, in a 1 year period, which is, I don't think anyone's ever done. I don't think Arena Mexico's ever even come close to that, and no other place. 1 million tickets, think about that. I mean, there's very few places that ever did $1 million in that era, let alone 1 million tickets, which is probably several $1 million. I mean, it's, the heyday of the Toreo was, one of the real, I don't know if there's anything that actually in history anywhere equals the heyday of the Toreo. And Fishman he wasn't the top guy, but he was in the top mix. It was Kinect. Perro was a superstar, and I mean, they had, all kinds of, big stars from all over the world came in. From Luthez, Billy Robinson, Pat Patterson, Hogan was in, Stan Hansen was in, Abdullah was in, Inoki, Fujinami, all those guys would come in for big shows. But, Fishman was, as far as like the natives and everything like that, he was in that top mix, one of the big draws that they had.
Peter says, how and when did Mascherano dos Mil get the nickname the father of more than 20 children?
I don't know. The Mr. Macho Man. He had a hair match today. I didn't even check on how what happened there. God, I hope he didn't win. He probably did, though. Just the way the angles were going, it looked like he was going to win, which makes no sense because, Maximo's like the world champion. You bring back like, a 58-year-old guy, who was a star like 20 years ago, and he better not win. But I think I don't know.
He lost to Maximo.
Oh, he did? They shaved his head, thank God.
Yep, getting his head shaved right here.
Yeah, anything else would have been so stupid.
Man, oh man. This person says, how different do you think the wrestling business would have been if Vince McMahon had bought Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988 instead of Ted Turner?
That's not how wrestling worked in those days. So it's like that's, I don't even know how to answer that question. He wouldn't have. So, you know what I mean? Vince didn't buy companies. I mean, Vince only bought Stampede Wrestling, and then he reneged on the payments. And did he buy anything else? I mean, I guess he technically bought WCW, but that was for the tape library, which was different. In 1988, nobody was thinking tape libraries had any value or anything like that. So, he didn't buy UWF. When Watts went out of business, Watts tried to sell it to him, and he had no interest. Vince didn't buy companies. I mean, he did try to buy the AWA, but the offer was so ridiculously low, it was an insult. So he didn't really try to buy it. In his own mind, I guess he did. But again, Stampede's the only one he bought.
This person here says, I know the draft was a way to increase ratings.
And Stampede, the only reason he bought it was to get all their TV outlets. It wasn't like he bought Stampede because he wanted to run Stampede. He bought it to shut it down. And he actually bought Georgia Championship Wrestling for TBS to shut it down. But for Crockett, there was nothing to buy because Ted Turner didn't like him. So he couldn't get back on TBS anyway. And he had syndication, so he didn't need the TVs in the markets. So there would be no reason for him to buy Jim Crockett Promotions.
This person says, I know the draft was a way to increase ratings and show attendance for SmackDown. Since the problem is that SmackDown is seen as the B brand, why doesn't Vince just rename SmackDown Raw? He could run 2 Raws a week. There is no longer a B show, at least on the surface. He could also get those milestone episode numbers much faster.
There's no good reason. It's just they do what they do. There's no reason that you can't name both shows Raw. But just tradition.
Person says, what are the chances that Front Row Brian's prediction that the new owners will look to get rid of USADA as a cost-cutting measure comes true?
Man, I just... I don't know. I don't know where their mentality is on everything. So I don't want to say it's not going to happen. But from a PR standpoint and a sponsor standpoint, it would be a disaster. Plus, you'd have all the fighters talking publicly about it. And it would make the sport look really bad, especially because there's been so many failures. And if you drop testing because there's been so... Like, if nobody failed at all and you drop testing, you could go, hey, look... Nobody's failing. No one's doing it. As ridiculous as that sounds, but when people are failing left and right and you drop it, from a PR standpoint, that becomes a real problem. So, again, I don't know. I don't know, like, Ari Emanuel and his mindset on this, but trying to be a sport and everything right now, man, I don't know. I don't see that one happening right now.
This person says, I recall you reported when WWE was airing on Spike TV, WWE had the right to veto UFC being aired on Spike. Do you think that Vince's decision to allow Spike to run The Ultimate Fighter after Raw in 2005 will go down as one of his worst business decisions? Ultimate Fighter clearly gave UFC a desperately needed shot in the arm at the time, and despite what WWE officials say, has competed in the marketplace for pay-per-view dollars and fans.
Yeah, and basically drove Vince off a pay-per-view. I don't think that anyone will ever say that. But if you think about it, when I've thought about it, it's like, yeah, if Vince knew what he knows now, no way in hell would he have done that.
Kind of amazing he did in the first place.
He doesn't know now what he did then.
Yeah, but it's just so unlike him. I mean, I kind of wonder if maybe Spike came to him and said, "Listen, dude, I know you got the right to refuse this, but the
whole thing. Look at how weak UFC was when this happened. I mean, they were so weak. They were a sport. They weren't head to head. He didn't think that real sport could compete with him. So, I mean, the whole mentality was different. He thought they were a dead brand, because they were. Look, they were losing tons of money. They were getting no traction at all. So, yeah, I mean, they hardly seemed like any kind of a threat to him. But I mean, yeah, like that one year when they did the pay-per-view the night before WrestleMania and they killed WrestleMania. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think that went well with Vince.
All right, everybody, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. We've got Raw tomorrow, the first Raw of 2017. Dave and I will be up after the show talking about that. And then I guess late Tuesday night after the Tokyo Dome as well. That's still your plan, a 5 a.m. show?
No way. I'll never. I don't think I'm going to be able to stay up that long. I'm still like, I don't know. I'm going to try, but I think we should just do it Wednesday. There's no way.
All right.
I mean, I can't guarantee. I'll probably fall asleep at 3 a.m. So.
Well, one way or the other, we'll be reviewing the Tokyo Dome. It's available on NJPW World. We'll talk more about that tomorrow.